All right, it says I'm live. I'm trying to fix this board here a little bit. So, greetings and welcome. And I see Len's probably been there waiting a couple minutes, wondering what the heck's going on. And happy Thursday to one and all, and especially from Leonard there in Middle Tennessee. And of course, I'm up here in the mountains of northern Arizona. Interestingly, this article that we've been reading from on Thursday nights is originally from Phoenix, Arizona, the McAlvany Intelligence Advisor. And so what we are going to do tonight, and the reason I'm a little bit late is because I'm trying to finish this entire article, 25 or 26 pages, with tonight and the next 2 Thursdays. And I'm not sure what may happen beyond that because I'm just not sure yet, depending on a couple of other things that are happening simultaneously, including, and I'm speaking specifically of what's going on in the, let's call it Eastern Europe theater. So I'm going to open tonight. It's a good thing that I didn't plan on doing a lot of preliminaries here. So that way we can get going. And even if I'm a couple minutes later, it's going to be just fine. And I know I can handle the load for tonight. If you're kind of new here, expect not to understand some or as much of this. Please stick with it. Previous weeks would help you to understand, because you're coming in the middle of something. We continue our exegesis of what is really happening and was all along, while very few were watching and very few knew. And I'm promising you these next 3 weeks, at least in this particular, from this article and whatever else I throw in, you will find a little more stimulating and challenging than most anything else you'll find. That's my wager. And let's see if it comes true, if I'm accurate. All right. So as I said, I'm not going to do a whole lot of intro type stuff, but because I'm coming from a biblical and exegetical frame of reference, and I'm talking about exegesis, where we try to figure out things from an historical grammatical perspective, as well as culturally and that type of thing, isagogics, history, as well as categories, categorical doctrine. So ICE, it's normally isagogics, categories, and exegesis. And that's why I do have the word exegesis up here, and the exegesis of what's really happening. So for those who have a strong stomach, bear with me. You're going to see some things tonight that you may or may not like. I may or may not like, but the point is, I'm looking at it from a reality check viewpoint, and I'm trying to put things together in a way. And again, I document what I say so that rather than you getting my opinion, like it's a one of those shows that's not a news show, but rather commentary and opinion, I'm thinking that you should be getting facts. And most of the time, facts are facts. So if you check them, the premises should be true. And I'm going to show you how taking a document that is over 30 years old is mostly accurate and true. And in about 2 more weeks, you'll see a bit more why, because when we get to the end there, it'll make a whole lot of sense why it's true. Here's the McAlvany Intelligence Advisor from September, October of 91 on the rebirth of an empire. And guess what? This rebirth has been going on for a long time Even this article is 31 years old, and it's been going on longer than that. So why don't we start in the proper way, which is in order to hopefully be correct and, let's say, accurate as possible. And of course, the better I can read, the easier it is to be accurate, because I just have to read this article to you. But the way we should do that is first come to God and ask for wisdom and discernment. Bina and, Chachma and Bina, to say the right words in the right order. Wisdom is Chachma, and Bina is understanding. And those are ancient words, like at least 3,000 or 4,000 years ago kind of stuff. And so we're going to have a moment of prayer to prepare ourselves for anybody out there who is a believer, to make sure they're in fellowship. Anybody else who has never placed their faith in Jesus Christ, who we celebrated the resurrection on Sunday, that's the reason for that is because he came and was promised and prophesied way before he came, thousands of years, a couple thousand at least. And he was the fulfillment of a promise. And by faith alone in him, faith alone in Christ alone, we have a special grace gift from God, and it's called regeneration. And it's got a lot of other terms associated with it, having to do with redemption and salvation, all this good stuff. And so I'm not going to get into the story of it, but I'm going to mention that if you have never placed your faith in Christ, now during silent prayer is a great moment to do it. And when you do so, you will understand this broadcast even more than you thought you could. And I promise you'll know more than you could, because this stuff, you can hear the words and put it together in a human frame of reference way. But there are spiritual connotations and spiritual aspects that you will not catch unless you are a believer and filled with the Spirit. Again, I'm not going to explain all the details on Thursday night, but if you want to catch me next Monday night or Wednesday, but particularly on Monday night, you'll get more information about it. And also, if you want to get a hold of me, faxandmusic.com. There's snail mail, my P.O. box. I'd be very happy to send you a copy of my most recent musical CD that's available free from me. You can also pay for it. You can listen to it on any music subscription service. There are 12 tunes on it. 8 of them are mine. 4 of them are covers. And by the way, I don't ask for money. This is a grace operation. This is a gift for you. My time, hopefully it's worth something to you, because I'm trying to give you information that's valuable. If so, my, I guess, most demanding request would be that if you heard my music on the internet, you don't have to buy it. You just listen and I get paid. How about that? So there's a little bit of good stuff before we get started. And it's kind of fun to think that, there's all this good stuff and it's free. So, and why is it free? Because it's a grace gift from the God of the universe, to whom we should take a moment now, without further adieu, or meaning in French, further to God, and pray to him and thank him and ask to be ready to take in this information. So on that note, let us pray. Thank you once again, Heavenly Father, for your grace. Thank you for this time together. Thank you for the subject, the material that we're going to be looking at. It is absolutely interesting and timely. Even though the article I'm reading from is decades old, the information is as fresh today as it was the day this article was written. And the information contained within it is applicable to the situations that we are experiencing. And specifically, to the issues of World War III. And so please sanctify these truths to the nourishment of our souls, make them perspicuous, that we can actually fully understand details that are going to help us to make good decisions in the future, and that will also glorify our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ and yourself. And we thank you for all these things in his name, B'Shem Yeshua HaMashiach. Amen. And so here we go. Here's the deal. Last week, we got to page 15, and I told you that we were going to continue from this section E on page, I guess it's 15, the new Soviet Federation. And it used to be, well, I'll just start reading and then you'll see what this guy, Donald McAlvany, who is an absolute a gem of an objective person. Here again, there's this picture right there. You can see Don S. McAlvany, the editor of this McAlvany Intelligence Advisor, an in-depth monetary, economic, geopolitical, and precious metals analysis. All right, so I'm going to start now. Oh, I should show you from this. We are in letter E near the bottom there, third from the bottom, the new Soviet Federation. And look at the sections. 1, Masters of Deception. 2, the Soviet pseudo-coup, Soviet theater at its best. 3, reorganizing and restructuring the empire. And under that, we're at letter E, the new Soviet Federation, which has been in progress and in process. And then over the next 2 weeks, the Soviet military buildup and practical considerations. So that's where we are. We've been doing a lot of work in this, and I know Leonard's been with me the entire time. I don't know that anybody else is paying attention, but I am. So, and thanks again for being here. And I should ask that anybody who watches this could share it at any time if you watch it in the future as a rerun. Last week, we ended, and again, this is from an article that was written in the end of 1991. We talked about 2 different categories in the Soviet Union. There were hardliners and reformers, and that a comment that I ended with, a paragraph that said, it's important for the West to understand that at that time, Gorbachev and Shevardnadze and Yeltsin, the reformers, are just as dangerous enemies to our survival as the Gang of 8, what we would call our hardliners. In fact, these reformers are more dangerous because they have caused the West to lower its threat perception, or in other words, to lower its guard. And then he says in parentheses, better the enemy you can see and defend against than the enemy who comes to you as a friend, as Brutus did to Julius Caesar before he stabbed him. And I added my Latin because I know this story where Gaius Julius Caesar gets stabbed, and then he looks at him and says, et tu, Brutus? You know, like, and you too, Brutus? You're also against me? And that's what this reference is, as Brutus did to Julius Caesar before he stabbed him. All right, continuing, the reformers will tell us what we want to hear. They will talk about democracy, free elections, free markets, multi-party systems, freedom, independence, etc., while giving these words their own Marxist-Leninist twist or meaning. If you are strangled by the hand in the velvet glove, instead of being bludgeoned by the ironclad fist, you are still dead. Okay, that's where we ended last Thursday night. So tonight, here comes the next section, the last in it's in Roman numeral 3, reorganizing and restructuring the empire. This last section, section E, is called the New Soviet Federation. When this article was written in 1991, it was explaining what was going on and what was going to happen. And like I said, it was really happening and was all along, even since before, like 1917, the beginning of the communist revolution. While very few were watching, there's a lot of stuff been going on for quite a long time. And it's hitting us now really hard and coming at us in droves, waves of all kinds of problems coming at us. So here we are, letter E, the new Soviet Federation. We are being told 31 years ago that the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, USSR, the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, okay, is collapsing. That is not really true. It is being voluntarily, and that word underlined, voluntarily disbanded by the Soviet leadership in favor of a new federation or union. To be called, and here's the change in the name, okay? Still the USSR, but it'll be called, instead of the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, now we're going to call it the Union of Soviet Sovereign Republics. I think you really might wonder if it's working well in Crimea. And how about now in Ukraine? Sovereign? You're going to see in this article, it's awesome. Okay, now all underlined. This restructuring, not disintegration as it is portrayed by Soviet disinformation and the Western media and parents, of the USSR, which in parents is the empire, has been on the drawing boards. Okay, so this restructuring has been on the drawing boards since before Gorbachev came into power. And then it says actually dating back to the late 70s. And there's a closed parens missing there. I'll add that. Didn't add it earlier because I guess when I read it, I didn't make a note. Okay, again, underlined, still, the leaders of the Soviet Union at that time, so back around the late 70s, began to realize that the present form of the Soviet Empire was archaic, inefficient, and counterproductive to further global expansion, except in remote areas of the world, i.e. Africa, Nicaragua. And I'll be referring to this book, The Nicaraguan Revolution, when we get around to it. This is just mentioning Nicaragua. So I'll reread that long sentence. The leaders of the Soviet Union at that time began to realize that the present form of the Soviet Empire was archaic, inefficient, and counterproductive to further global expansion, except in remote areas of the world, i.e. Africa, Nicaragua, not contiguous, however you want to pronounce that, to the USSR. Okay, so doesn't say the rest, but I'm going to add to it. Like all those countries that are connected, that's why it's contiguous, connected like states are, California to Arizona, Nevada, and Idaho, and Oregon, and all that kind of stuff. The way they're all connected to each other by an invisible line, all those other countries right now that they're not talking about are the ones we're dealing with, like what was Crimea, which was next to and a part of, connected to Ukraine, and then to the west of that, you have all those other countries along that border of Ukraine and going up into Russia. And you have Moldova and Lithuania and all that kind of stuff. And, a bunch of those countries all nearby, like Poland and etc. All right. In a certain sense, the Western policy of containment and the advent of NATO in the 1950s had been reasonably successful in restricting the USSR's European growth beyond Eastern Europe and the Soviet republics. Again, Soviet republics, all those little countries that broke away and are in threat of being taken over again. Just as slavery in the old American South had become unprofitable, not productive, and uneconomical before the U.S. Civil War. So even before the Civil War, these things like slavery had become unprofitable and not productive and uneconomical. So the Soviet Empire was seen over a decade back, so let's say the 1980s, to need deep reform in its imperial structure. Remember Lenin's admonition, quote, "We advance through retreat," end quote. The apparent demise of the Soviet Empire will speed the dismantling. So will speed the dismantling of NATO and Western Europe's and America's military structures will be dismembered in the new, and here in quotes and italicized, era of peace, death of communism, end of the Cold War, and collapse of the evil empire, end quotes. And the USSR's long-term goal of the neutralization of their Western flank, preparatory to the absorption of Western Europe, and then added in parentheses, politically, economically, and militarily, will have been accomplished. Now, that all happened while very few were watching. If you think the Eurozone and all the countries giving up their sovereignty and their monies, like Belgian and French francs, German marks, Spanish pesetas, and all the countries around there, Italy had lira, all these countries had their own kinds of money. And the only one that kept their regular form of money, currency, was England with the pound. The pound never stopped, even though the European Economic Community, the EEC, all those countries became like states, and they all came under one kind of currency, the euro. And that's another interesting historical development. And again, a part of this article, without this article mentioning it, because it happened about 10 years after this article was written. And so I'll continue here. It is essential that as the new federation replaces the old union, that the new be seen to be made up of sovereign, independent states, democratically oriented, with multi-party political systems and free market economies. That will be the perception as it is today in Poland, Romania, Nicaragua, etc. But it will not be the reality. The rhetoric will be free market and democratic, as far as, as it is in the Soviet Union today. But the reality, underlined reality, is that the Soviet military and the KGB, regardless of its new name, through a series of treaties with, and that's underlined, with infiltration and subversion of, underlined of, and economic pressure on, underlined. So the so-called, quote, sovereign independent republics will continue to maintain control of those republics. And that's underlined. So check this out. The rhetoric is free market. I'm going to put this up because there's a lot of underlining and my reading doesn't do it the justice. The rhetoric will be free market and democratic as it is in the Soviet Union today. But the reality is that the Soviet military and the KGB, regardless of its new name, through a series of treaties with infiltration and subversion of and economic pressure on the so-called sovereign independent republics, will continue to maintain control of those republics. See, in other words, it's Soviet theater. If you didn't make the previous Thursday nights, you can get them on a replay on both YouTube and Twitter. Just go down my Twitter feed, right down there, PW for Theo on Twitter, and you can go back weeks. Or if you're on YouTube, go, and there's only been 5 previous weeks. I don't remember which one it was where we discussed some of this, whether it was the second or third or fourth one, whatever. But the point is, all of this Soviet theater, I can at least tell you where it is on here. The Soviet pseudo-coup, Soviet theater at its best. See, Roman numeral 2. So this is what I'm saying. If you caught the previous week, you're tracking with me. If not, go check them out as a replay. I noticed that there seem to be more and more people watching these broadcasts after the fact. And the next time I look, I see that there are more people that have seen it. And it's always to the tune of a total of 4 or 10. It's not like I've got a zillion people watching this. But again, as we say in French, tant pis pour eux, which means tough for them. They missed it. Meanwhile, we're covering the information. Now, and it's getting hairy. Let me tell you, this is getting really, it's going to, by the end of tonight, even, you're going to see it's pretty hairy stuff here. Let me see. I'll continue. As Dr. Françoise Thome, respected Sovietologist and professor at the University of Sorbonne in Paris, said recently, we fail to see the great design underlying Moscow's new imperial policy. This failing leads to the misunderstanding of the Soviet European policy. You know what? I just got a heads up. And you're right, I'm not tonight on 5G. Let me fix you, Len, for bringing that up. I'm glad every so often I look at my posts here and see to add that. Am I still 5G? No, I was not. And thanks for the heads up. Because now I guess that means everything will be clearer. How long have we been on here? Sheesh. I'm glad I started late. I'm only 30 minutes, 27 minutes of live. All right. So thanks, Len. Not to be confused with Lenin. Saying that for the first time. All right. So continuing. What does Dr. Françoise Thome say? We fail to see, and this is a quote, the great design underlying Moscow's new imperial policy. New imperial policy underlined. This failing leads to the misunderstanding of the Soviet European policy, because since the launching of perestroika, Moscow's European policy has become, and this is underlined, a continuation of Moscow's great imperial design. Now, apparently that's an end quote, because I got another quote. See, I keep finding typos. Let's read the last section on the page here. So I just added that little closed parens. Last paragraph. It is essential for us to understand this strategy. For Moscow, the preservation of the empire depends more and more on the domination of the international community. When the Kremlin's influence, or even hegemony on Europe is fully established, the Baltics' quest for independence will seem irrelevant. Not only that, notice how quickly they get rid of it. Now, let me check on something. All of a sudden, it got fuzzy. And are you talking about before I went to 5G? Because that's an easy question. You can say yes or no. Hopefully, it isn't fuzzy anymore. Yeah, that 2.4G doesn't cut it. So thank you, Len, for giving me the heads up. and I'll keep looking to see for a response. So what we're seeing, good. Yeah, I got an affirmative from Len. What we see here from, and there's more from Dr. Françoise, as I will call her, Dr. Thom, Thom. She is pointing out that the Baltics' quest for independence, they had some independence, let's call it. Well, they don't have it anymore. And they sort of have it, but sort of don't. And you'll see more about that as I continue this article, okay? Because it does say all that in the next hour. Professor Thom points out, and this is all underlined, that the political elite in the USSR saw the need for restructuring and reorganizing the imperial empire over a decade ago. So that would have been around 1980. This is 31 years ago, this article. But that, and then in quotes, inertia of the Soviet power apparatus, in quotes, delayed the process until now. Now, I'm telling you that what is said there from 1980 to 1990, let's say 81, 91, whatever, we've had a similar 30-year buildup and a 30-year delay to what is going on. It's more like about 20 or 22 years since the advent of Putin. And so that's very important, is that you realize Putin has been building up for this and building up to this for the entire time that he has been, let's call it, developing his career. And that's been going on for all these decades. And that's only since about 2000 or late 90s, 2002, whatever period in there you want to put it. That's when all this stuff got cooking with Putin. And but we are now in World War III, and Putin is the Hitler of World War II. He is the Putin of World War III. And I exaggerate not one iota. So I'll reread that sentence and continue. And in fact, I'll put it up. Top of the page here, underlined. Professor Thom points out that the political elite in the USSR saw the need for restructuring and reorganizing the imperial empire over a decade ago, but that inertia of the Soviet power apparatus delayed the process until now. This explains the real conflict between reformers, liberals, and the hardliners, the conservatives. The former, so the liberals, are more enlightened regarding the need for change. Look at the big underlined sentence here. They are not only trying to purge, reorganize, and restructure the Communist Party and the Soviet system in order to save and strengthen it, but the entire empire as well. This is also essential to seduce Western Europe into integration and merger with the new democratic, in quotes there, Soviet Federation. Now, notice all this has come to pass. Europe is socialist. The United States is socialist. They're leaning heavily toward communism because socialism is the seed. And it's taking all of this time from, let's say, the early 1900s, 1920, and so on, into the 1950s and 60s, and the Cold War, and to the 80s and 90s, and then now the past 20 years, all of this is building up. Like I said, what is really happening and was all along while very few were watching. Editor's note: to better understand the Soviets' present incredibly devious strategy of deception, remember that's the Soviet theater, this writer recommends that the reader go to a video store and rent the film, The Sting. You may have seen it a long time ago. Sophisticated, complicated scams or cons are run all the time. Most honest people simply don't understand them and cannot believe that people are deceptive or clever enough to put them together. But remember, the Soviets are the world's chess champions, and they always lie. And then he puts in parentheses, when it is to their advantage to do so. The latter is part of their Marxist-Leninist doctrine. As Professor Tom continued, quote, the current upheaval in the Soviet Empire led the present Soviet leadership to seek an accelerated all-European integration, end quote. Editor's note, i.e. the common European home that Gorbachev has talked about in the CPSU congresses since coming into power in 1985. Remember the CPSU, Communist Party of the Soviet Union. And now a quote from Gorbachev and underlined, this is possible only with a radical change of both West European and East European political systems. All European integration is conceivable only if, excuse me, an homogenization of the political structures of East and West takes place, end quote. Another editor's note. What we are seeing is the convergence or merger theory in a European context first, then globally, including the US. 1991, this writing. The radical change in the West European political system, in quotes, Professor Tom refers to is the US of Western Europe. The political merger of Europe in 1992 under Euro socialists in Brussels, whereby the European countries will yield their sovereignty to the European superstate. The, and in quotes, radical change in the East European political system, end quote, is the restructuring / reorganizing of the CPSU, KGB, the USSR from top to bottom and of the empire itself, analyzed in this issue of the McAlvany Intelligence Advisor. All right, so that ends that section and starts the next one, the form and substance of the new Soviet Federation or empire. Now notice it says leaders of 25th, 27th, and 26th, 27th, and 25th Congresses. I don't know why I put them in that order. He puts 26, 27, and 25th. And then he says in 81, 86, and 90. And later I see that the 25th is in 90. I'm not sure what's going on here because there's a consistency in this article that's inconsistent with numbers. You'd think that 25 was in 81, 26 in 86, and 27 in 90. But no, it's 25 and 26 in 81 and 86. And then 25, did I say that right? It's 26 and 27 in 81 and 86, and then 25 and 90. Anyway, sorry to confuse you with all that, but it's here in the notes, and it's consistent. So he's either right and he's saying it correctly and it looks wrong, or something else. Anyway, the idea is there were 3 of these Congresses in 81, 86, and 90. And so what he says is, if one studies the proceedings and speeches of Gorbachev, Yeltsin, and other Kremlin leaders in the 26th, 27th, and 25th Congresses of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union, CPSU, in 81, 86, and 90, one will see that they have been talking about and planning, for the new federation since 1981. Editor's note. I'm going to put this up so that you can read it and see it, and it'll be good. It'll be there for replays. The Eurasia Research Group, 2460 South University Boulevard, Denver, Colorado, has translated, analyzed, and published, excuse me, the speeches and proceedings of these Congresses, as well as books, publications, and other materials over the past few years in a series of pentalogs, which are available to research groups throughout the free world who wish to do further study on current developments in the USSR. Subscription rate, $100 a year for 12 issues. This finder finds this to be excellent information coming directly from Soviet publications. All right, the next section. Let me get a drink of water. Getting dry. Cheers. My usual Pellegrino, or no, Perrier and lime. It's amazing how you get dry every so often from doing a lot of talking or singing. Elements of the new federation for the existing republics. There are, I think, 8 of these. Let me see. No, there are more. 10. All right. Elements of the new federation for the existing republics. 1. The new federation or union will include the following elements in regards to the current 15 Soviet republics. 1. The Soviet Union as we know it will be dissolved and a new, underlined, union or federation established to be called the Union of Soviet Sovereign Republics instead of Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. Now they're not socialist, they're sovereign. 2, under the new union, each republic will have more independence at the cultural and economic level and will appear to be an independent multi-party democracy at the political level and will still be under the military influence or domination of the Soviet Union at the military level. In parentheses and underlined, the sovereign republics will appear to be freer and more independent than they really are. Okay, point 3. The huge Russian Republic, now under Yeltsin, will have more power in the new setup and will look more like Germany during World War II. It will dominate the new Soviet Federation. In the early stages of the new Soviet Federation, the Russian Republic will be portrayed as equal to the other republics. This will be part of the charade to fool the West and the republics. Point 4. Each of the 15 republics will have a vote in the UN. Check out this problem, this strategy. Oh, I see cheers from Len. I'm late. All right, I do this when I'm late. I'll drink again. It's only water. All right. Each of the 15 republics will have a vote in the UN, whereas only the USSR, the Ukraine, and Belarusia, Belarusia, have had votes since its inception. So since the beginning of the UN, there were 3 votes. Now there will be 15, and watch the rest of the story. If some or most of these republics retain their loyalties to the USSR, that is potentially 12 more votes against America in the UN. And that's been happening all these years. Not to be missed. Okay, number 5. The republics will be made to look independent and sovereign. We'll talk about and actually move to more free market economies, multi-party systems, and economic freedom, but will continue to be controlled by covert communists and in reality by the Communist Party of the Soviet Union, the KGB, and the Soviet military. And then in parentheses, it says, no matter what their new names turn out to be, because they can change the names of the KGB and all that. Point 6. Treaties between the USSR and many of these republics, tying them right back into the Soviets, are being signed at this writing. Lenin said, quote, "A treaty is a means for gaining strength," end quote. i.e., the Ukrainian communist leadership just recently declared independence and then turned around and signed a treaty of military and economic cooperation with Russia. They came right back into the new federation. Question: when is sovereignty not really sovereignty? Answer: when it is fake! Exclamation mark. Editor's note: the Anti-Bolshevik Network, ABN, a German publication, was recently quoted by Pat Buchanan as attacking the Ukrainian parliament reformers as being a group of phonies who actually support the communists. This situation will be found in many, if not most, of the other republics as well. Okay, so there's your editor's note. Once again, the guy's on top of it. Okay, point 7 of these 10 points. Most of the independent republics are economic basket cases. They will get sympathy and free market rhetoric from the West, but very little in the way of economic aid or trade. And in parentheses, unfortunately, they are not creditworthy, can't pay their bills, and don't really understand free enterprise. So they will remain de facto dependent on the Russian Republic and the USSR economically. They will continue to get the raw materials for their industries from the USSR and then sell their finished products back to the USSR. See, that has been going on all these 3 decades. It's amazing. Editor's note: this situation has a recent historic parallel in South Africa, where 4 tribal homelands became independent a decade or so ago, so around 1980, but remained economically dependent on South Africa. And it says in parentheses, their former mother country and an economic colossus compared to the homelands, end parentheses. Those new countries were allowed to have armies, and then in parentheses, albeit small, weak, poorly armed defense forces, end parentheses, but those are dwarfed and can be easily dominated by the relatively huge South African Defense Force. So puppet militaries is what they had and were. That's all they were. And it says, but those dwarfed and can easily be dominated by the relatively huge South African Defense Force. Those countries will probably be reintegrated back into the new South Africa in the foreseeable future, which seems likely to come under the rule of the communist ANC over the next year or 2. Remember the ANC, the African National Congress, and that was a communist deal, and it says it right here. Okay, point 8 of 10. The sovereign independent republics will be allowed to have armies, but these will be minuscule, underlined, compared to the gargantuan Russian military force, functioning more like local militias or the National Guard in the various states of America. Point 9. There will be much talk about multi-party democracy in the sovereign republics, but most of these parties will be Marxist-Leninist, either overtly or covertly, and or controlled and manipulated by the KGB, in parentheses here, as is the case in much of Eastern Europe today, end parentheses. And finally, point 10, the sovereign republics will be more free, but still within the walls of the Soviet prison. For the Soviets, the word sovereignty is really a matter of semantics. It doesn't mean to them what it means to us. To them, it doesn't mean total independence, only partial. And here, editor's note. The Baltics and a few other newly independent republics may opt not to join the new federation or union for a while, or perhaps ever. But non-joiners will come under incredible overt and covert pressure to join up, and eventually most of the republics will probably join. Communist infiltration and subversion within the republics will also play a role here, as will economic pressure. Now, I want to make a point here that some of the countries in that area, right there to the west of Ukraine, that are, a couple of them are a part of the NATO, and so the European side, Western European countries, and some of them are not. Some of them are aligned with the Soviet Union at this point, and some of them have been forced, like Crimea is one, and Ukraine, they're trying to make it one. So, all right, this next section, I have a big star here. Elements of an expanded Soviet Federation beyond the old borders. So my little star here is so that you can see I was making a point of this section. It is definitely what he said 30 some years ago, and it's expanding like crazy. Of even greater importance are the Kremlin leaders' plans for expansion of the new Soviet Federation beyond existing borders of the USSR. Remember, I already mentioned they want to make Europe, East and Western Europe, one block under their hegemony and authority. Okay, this has got 4 main points and a conclusion. And so we're moving right along here. I'm looking at how many pages I have left, how far I plan to go. All right, I better keep on racing along. Okay, again, of even greater importance are the Kremlin leaders' plans for expansion of the new Soviet Federation beyond existing borders of the USSR. And that's happening as we speak, or as I speak and you listen, or you can say whatever you want on your end. I can't hear you, but I'm listening. And of course you can write. 1, the new Soviet Federation is designed to suck Eastern Europe into the Union via a series of economic and military treaties. That started right away 30 years ago. Soviet influence in the former East European satellite countries is still very strong. For example, consider Romania, a country of 24 million. Roughly 4 million are Communist Party members. 8 million are Komsomol members. I'll explain that in a minute. 8 million are children and don't count politically. That leaves 4 million non-communist adults out of a population of 24 million. The new president, Iliescu, is communist. The ruling party, New Salvation Front, is communist. The secret police, 49,000 members, is communist. So he asks, who controls Romania today? There it is. Now, on top here where it says the Komsomol members, that is the same concept. They'll have it in every country in every part of the world whenever they do this kind of thing. It's the same idea as what we all know of and remember, the Hitler Youth. Okay, so this is the Russian version. And I should say it's even, let's go further and call it, because it's all over the world by different names, the communist version of the, let's call it, Nazi fascist version of Hitler. So second of 4 points, or second of 4 elements. The new Soviet Federation is designed to eventually encompass Eastern Europe, the USSR, Afghanistan, Cambodia, which is now Kampuchea, Vietnam, Laos, Mongolia, a united Korea. So are you looking forward to knowing that South Korea becomes communist? because they wouldn't be thinking of a united Korea where North Korea becomes, whatever you want to call it, for free market. And the People's Republic of China. Well, they're already, that's funny. The new Soviet Federation is designed to eventually encompass China. I think right now we're seeing it as looking at the other way around. That's how much that has changed in 30 years. So, in other words, the grand design of the Soviet strategists is by giving up the present antiquated, stagnant empire and the outdated, ineffective Warsaw Pact to put together a far larger, voluntary, underlined voluntary, Marxist-Leninist dominated federation encompassing 1.5 billion people. Well, now there's 1.5 billion in China alone. Forget Europe and whatever. I think there's 200 and I want to say around 230, but that's something like 230 million in Russia. And I may be off on that. Maybe it's 160 or maybe it's more than 230, but I thought it's a small number, smaller than America. It's a bigger country as far as massive land mass, but most people don't choose to live in places like Siberia for a reason, and the North Pole or whatever. So, as it said there, to put together a far larger voluntary Marxist-Leninist dominated federation encompassing 1.5 billion people. Remember, Lenin said, and then quote, "We advance through retreat," end quote. Number 3, a second group of countries in the region of the Indian Ocean Rim will be brought into the new Soviet Federation sometime later. Those will include Iraq, Iran, Syria, Lebanon, India, Sri Lanka, the Philippines, and Indonesia. The latter 3 have yet to fall to communist insurgencies, but are targeted the same. So, point 4. The most important part of the new federation is to get the other socialist countries to join it. The goal is voluntary membership under communism, or Marxism-Leninism, or social democracy if the word communism is abolished. Oh, I see. You mean what we have in America? It's communism, but we just call it social democracy. And to see what's in it. The mortar, which will ultimately hold together the bricks of the new federation, is economics and socialist ideology. But the Soviet military power will also play a major role, as well as the defender of unity. Oh, defender of unity. You mean they blow up people and stuff and then say, we give medals to our wonderful Russian soldiers for having done such a wonderful, they've done a terrific job and wonderful thing for the motherland, as they call it. So yeah, the major role, the Soviet military power as the defender of unity. We're going to get into that next week in detail. Editor's note, the Soviets never set timetables, but with the speed at which world events are now transpiring, much of the new federation's internal, underlined, restructuring should be a fait accompli within 1 to 3 years. Well, it's been a fait accompli over and over again, and we're in a new phase of it now. So it keeps going to the next step and the next step. The external, that's internal expansion. The external expansion of the new federation should be well advanced within 5 to 10 years. Well, that's gone back and forth some. So, but they're on a drive at this point and not getting anywhere, but boy, they're doing a lot of killing. Conclusion, and meaning conclusion of this section. Hang on, I'm going to get a quick sip here. Dry throat. By Soviet definition, peace democracy, and social progress does not exactly stand for capitalism. Huh. Peace, democracy, and social progress does not exactly stand for capitalism. World communism, or should we call it social democracy? Ah, you mean like in the US? On the other hand, includes in its basic ideals the premises of peace, democracy, and social progress. Therefore, current Soviet developments are strictly in line with the reorganization of the country, and then this is all underlined, in order for it to achieve a better opportunity for expansion, all underlined, period. In the future, all political parties in the world with communist or socialist leanings, including the social and national Democrats, will become partners with the CPSU for a common world movement. Fat chance. Now, remember when I had that little bit of confusion about the Congresses, the 25th, 6th, and 7th? Okay, here he mentions again the 25th in 1990. The weird thing is on the previous page, okay, it did say in 81, 86, and 90. So somehow it looks like the 25th Congress is after the 26th and 7th. It makes no sense to me. But here's what he says. As the 1990 25th Congress stated, quote, the USSR is in a transition from a unitary state to a friendship of nations. Yeah, with a gun to your head. This friendship of nations will comprise hundreds of millions of people not now in the Soviet Union and a greater number of nations also not now in the USSR. We are witnessing today the birth of a new socialist communist conglomerate which will be much more potent economically, politically, and militarily than the Soviet Union of today. And for all those just catching this eventually, this article is from 31 years ago. In countries ruled by monarchies, when the king dies, the cry goes up, the king is dead, long live the king, in parentheses, meaning the new king. In the present case, it can be said, the empire is dead, long live the empire, meaning the new expanded empire. Editor's note, the Soviets are chess geniuses, the best in the world. We see the continuing contest between the East and West as a giant chess match. And now this next couple of sentences, 3 of them or so, all underlined. The ultimate goal of the match is to take or checkmate the king, which is America. But the intermediate goal is to take the queen, which is Western Europe. Once the queen and perhaps some of her bishops, rooks, or knights, i.e. South Africa, the Philippines, perhaps South Korea, etc., have fallen, the king, i.e. America, becomes vulnerable. It will only be a matter of time until he falls. So watch out, because very few are watching. This is getting serious. Okay. Where am I in my article here? Okay, so they see, the Soviets, the continuing contest between the East and West as a giant chess match. The ultimate goal of the match is to take or checkmate the king. Okay, I read all this. It will only be a matter of time until he falls. Okay. In the meantime, if the Soviet chess masters have to sacrifice some of their pawns, rooks, or knights, i.e. such as the Baltics, a few Eastern European countries, which they don't really have right now, but there are a couple of them that they've already given up, like Lithuania and Romania and all that. and some of the Soviet republics. For the greater gain of taking her opponents, the Queen, i.e. Western Europe, remember? The present sacrifice is worth it. In this chess match, however, the Soviet chess masters hope to get all or most of their pawns, rooks, bishops, and knights back. Look what they're doing. They got Crimea. They're working on Ukraine. If they get that, are they going to go for Moldova and all those other Latvia and Lithuania and Romania and all those other countries around there? It's a mess. So now we go to, we're going to start this one, section 4, the Soviet military buildup. It's going on right now, isn't it? Actually, it's been going on, and they feign weakness. Oh, we've lost so many tanks and soldiers and aircraft, so we're going to lick our wounds and come back and do some more damage. Guess what? They could do that 100 times. They got a bunch of stuff stockpiled. And then they even get volunteers from other countries to make it look like, oh, we're running out of people. Well, there's a lot that could be said about all that, but it's complicated, as they say. So, number 4, the Soviet military buildup. Quote, check this quote out, and who quoted it. Even with the START treaty, you, the Soviets, will have the ability to destroy the U.S. in 30 minutes, end quote. Who said it? I'm going to read the next quote too. General Colin Powell. Now, here's what Gorbachev said. The effectiveness of our foreign policy is secured by the might of our country, the component part of which is our armed forces. And that's before Putin came along. Imagine what it's like now. Putin's been building this up. By the way, I keep wanting to say, go on YouTube and watch documentaries about the history of Putin, the history of Russia, Russia's military, whatever you can watch. You'll have a much better and much more objective and big overall view and picture of what the heck is going on. It's going to get thick. I told you it is World War III, and I'm not exaggerating, and you will feel it, because I wanted to mention that the right says our southern border is a national security issue. And then the left, when they say there's crickets, you don't hear anything. Okay. Objective or accurate truth be told, truth with a capital T, we have already been invaded. And, you know, this applies, think of invasion to Ukraine as well. Our southern border is absolutely ridiculous at this point. And I don't live that far from it. Fortunately, I'm in northern Arizona. But it's still, and I'm up in the mountains. So I'm like in a fortress, just like the Bible says. When you hear of all the trouble, run for the hills. Well, I lived in Woodland Hills in California. So I went from the hills to the mountains. And there you go. All right, so here we go. I'm going to continue. In spite of the incredible political shakeup which is taking place in the Soviet Union 30 years ago, the gargantuan Soviet military machine remains intact and virtually unchanged. The KGB will be moved under the Soviet military command, which hardly means a diminishing of the role of either organization. The Soviet army still has 5 million men, 250,000 Spetsnaz commandos, that's special forces, and 1.5 million KGB soldiers and or operatives. I pulled up a funny little book I have. The Defense Language Institute, and on the cover there is one of the language books and one of the army guys. His hair is probably longer than in reality. But it's called the In inside story, a special yearbook edition. And I wanted you to see, speaking of Spetsnaz, a cartoon here at the bottom. Tell me, Spetsnaz, how long have you had this overwhelming urge to study Russian? I mean, look at the guy. The point is, he is Russian, and he comes there acting like he's not, only he's wearing his special forces uniform with all his medals. The guy who wrote this book, and you can see on the signature on the cartoon there, the Chinese signature, that's Bob Hunt, Major Hunt, U.S. Army. And see, there's the deal, and he signs it there at the bottom. It says, for Philippe Willems, the best Korean guitar player at DLI, I admire your courage and determination, Bob Hunt. And so that's his Chinese signature. Anyway, Spetsnaz. We're going to see about that. So the Soviet army still has 5 million men, 250,000 Spetsnaz commandos, 1.5 million KGB soldiers and or operatives. They still have a 5-to-1, and we'll see charts on that. I'm not going to get into the details so much now or next week, but I have charts here that you'll hear more about. It says, and 5-to-1 conventional military lead over America and a 5 or 6-to-1 strategic nuclear lead over America. They still have 20,000 nuclear warheads targeted on America. Remember, this is 31 years ago. Who knows what they have now? Well, I haven't looked it up. If the hardline coup had been for real, that was mentioned early on in this article against Gorbachev, the Soviet military could have launched those nuclear missiles against America, and we have zero defense against them. We cannot stop even one of them, regardless of who is in charge, hardliners or reformers. So that's a very interesting note from 1991. So under the Soviet military buildup, section 4, as you can see, Roman numeral 4, we now go to letter A, Soviet military education and indoctrination. Since the Russian Revolution, the Soviet Union has considered military power as the most important force to protect the gains of socialism. Soviet military forces are educated to conform with the latest theories of scientific communism, and their armaments are updated according to the most recent developments of the sciences. Underlined here. Unlike the soldier in Western countries, the Soviet soldier does not serve his country first, but swears and owes his first allegiance to the Communist Party of the Soviet Union, the CPSU. This is true as well for the Communist Sandinistas and the Sandinista Army of Nicaragua. Now, this article from 91, this book I got back in approximately 88. You can see there, 1988. And I was in a class on the FSLN, the ideology of Sandinistas and the Nicaraguan Revolution. And we're not going to get into it too much now, but let me keep reading. You know, there'll be more mention. So that's why it says this bit about the soldier. The Soviet soldier does not serve his country first, but swears and owes his first allegiance to the Communist Party. So every one of those commies, think about it. Every one of those soldiers, commies. This is true as well for the Communist Sandinista and the Sandinista Army of Nicaragua. So that as another example. To control and teach the ideology of communism, commissars and political leaders are attached to each military unit. Did you ever see the Hunt for Red October? How on the submarine, they had that guy who was the agent that would come and He's basically a commissar and deals with the captain of the ship. And he is supposed to inform. Watch what this says. All Soviet men undergo training and serve in the army. The training, aside from martial arts, strategy, and operation of the different types of armaments, involves a heavy dose of political and patriotic education. So the idea is that these commissars and political leaders, they also come and check on the ship to see if there's any issue at any time that could be a problem for the state. And then they have authority to create disciplinary means of correcting the situation. So during the Great Patriotic War, World War II, the Great Patriotic War, all education and propaganda was directed against the Nazis. But with the death of Nazism, the Soviets retrained their sights from German Nazism and Japanese militarism to American imperialism. Unfortunately, and this is all underlined now, unfortunately, in spite of the current flagrant disinformation, we Americans remain enemy number one, and the basic education of the Soviet soldier is directed at proving his superiority over the American soldier. That's all underlined. Over the past 46 years, that was in 1991, since World War II, the Soviets have developed an incredibly sophisticated, comprehensive, and exhaustive system of political indoctrination. It begins with children 5 years old and up through young adults, both in and outside of the schools. The two primary organizations for this indoctrination are the one I mentioned earlier on, Komsomol, the Young Communist League, and DOSAF, the Voluntary Society for Cooperation with the Army, Air Force, and Navy. While Komsomol is instrumental in political indoctrination, DOSAF is the most important organization in preparing the Soviet youth for war. DOSAF operates under the military division of the Central Committee of the CPSU and the Ministry of Defense of the USSR, does the compulsory pre-military training of all young men and women between the ages of 16 and 18. Most of the young population of the Soviet Union retained their membership in DOSAF. In 1988, DOSAF's membership exceeded 107 million people. In the Soviet Union, the political education of the entire population, but especially of the army and draft or pre-draft age youth, is of paramount importance. It is strongly believed that only a soldier who has been politically indoctrinated is ready to fight and perform heroically in the defense of the socialist state. Typical of the kind of anti-American political indoctrination the entire youth of the USSR received from age 5 to 20 is the following passage from the book, Youth Become Men in the Ranks, by General M.I. Druzhinin, a leader of DOSAF education. Okay, check it out right there. See, there you go. What I was just reading. Okay, let's see if I can read this while you look at it. Quote, U.S. imperialism has unleashed a previously unheard of arms race. It insolently rattles with the most barbaric arms of mass destruction. It aspires to squash with its power liberation movements and peoples fighting for peace. It threatens to drag humanity into a destructive conflagration of nuclear war. It is capable of burning to ashes the entire civilization on our planet. And then it continues. It is not in vain that the Soviet armed forces are not only the proven sentinel of our motherland, they are also the guarantors of peace on earth. Were our army and navy not as mighty as they are, were they not in possession of such a fighting potential representing in themselves a perfect mixture of high technology, military mastership, and invincible moral spirit, the reactionary imperialist circles, especially the United States of America, would have long ago attempted to perform aggression against the Soviet Union and other socialist countries in order to realize their black reverie, the destruction of socialism as a political system. Quote, now, underlined, it is common knowledge that in the immediate past, American presidents have approved plans of nuclear attacks on our motherland, and not just once or twice. These plans have had code names: Trojan, Dropshot, etc. Only the Soviet soldiers' mighty power of retaliation and the readiness to answer the aggressor's blow with a destructive blow have torn apart their fanatic plans. So, editor's note, this is a small sample of the kind of anti-American propaganda that Soviet youth are being indoctrinated with, even as the Soviet leadership, underline, pretends to be America's friend and partner. Underlined, recently, the trend to inject more political ideology into the armed forces has become even stronger. All right, we're getting close to the end here for tonight. The reason given is the crystallization of extremely complicated conditions of acute antagonism between the two social systems, imperialism and socialism. As Oleg A. Belkov wrote in his book, Ready to Defend the Motherland, quote, future historians will be amazed to find that to guarantee the chance of victory, the responsible individuals were counting the number of present communists in the army with more diligence than the number of machine guns and pieces of artillery, end quote. In other words, political indoctrination is more important than weapons. So the first thing they want to make sure is that you're a good communist. And then they'll send you into battle knowing that you will die for the motherland. Underlined, the Soviet military leadership believes war with the American imperialists is inevitable. In their writings, they constantly refer to the inevitable upcoming war, end quote. They believe that only the Soviet Union with its armed forces can save the world. As General Druzhinin explains in the Soviet View, or explains the Soviet View, quote, as long as imperialism exists with its anti-humane, reactionary, and militarist essence, the danger of military attack on our motherland remains a fact. Then underlined for emphasis, in recent years, the danger of such aggression has especially grown. We must be fully armed to be able to ward off possible aggression and trustfully guarantee the security of the state. Experience shows that preparation must be started beforehand to solve this problem. Underlined, we cannot wait for thunder to strike. We must initiate. And then it goes on, leaning on youth of all ages. We cannot waste time. Such loss is irreplaceable and during war costs a great amount of blood. Take heed, my friends, probably said comrades, and make your own conclusions. Editor's note, we in the West must make our own conclusions. Underlined, editor's note. All right, we're going to read right here up to the Soviet arms acquisitions. So I'll stop after this paragraph. Another ominous development in Soviet military education and indoctrination of the writings. Let me read that again. Another ominous development in Soviet military education and indoctrination is the resurrection of the writings, strategies, and tactics of Field Marshal Alexander Suvorov, a prominent 18th century Russian general and military genius and strategist. Suvorov's writings on warfare strategies and tactics, first published by Suvorov in his life work, Science to Conquer, have recently been republished and rewritten and hundreds of thousands of copies are being widely distributed throughout the Soviet military and political hierarchy. Suvorov's successful tactics of speed, maneuverability, audacious attack, etc., are now being widely studied in the USSR, much as Sun Tzu's Art of War has been a Bible for the Soviet military and KGB for decades. The resurrection of Suvorov in the USSR could signal a new and far more aggressive Soviet military strategy. So next week, we'll start here with, the Soviet arms acquisitions. And under there, you can see a little bit these weapons productions and the charts of all that. And then more info to come. So next week, it's going to be a little bit more on the militaristic side of things, but you will find it hopefully fascinating and nerve-wracking at the same time, in that what we're looking at is the formidable concentration and the whatever you want to call, let me think of the right word, the attitude of an enemy that rivals our own. Now, we may say they're smaller, they have smaller population, but I always say, yeah, that's until they start winning other areas, and then they get mercenaries. They were doing that right now with Ukraine. They're getting mercenaries from other nearby countries where they have, let's call it, contractual agreements. Everything that I've been saying from these pages, this article, is going on right now. And that's why the title tonight, Exegesis of What is Really Happening and Was All Along, while very few were watching. Most people are busy doing other things. They don't have a clue this is going on. They really don't have a clue. And nobody's watching me either. I mean, I get as many as 5 or 10 people per broadcast, and only 1 or 5 or 3 or something live, maybe, between YouTube and Twitter. But that's okay. I'm saving all these broadcasts, and they won't be as good a quality when they're playbacks, but that's okay. So, and I have to figure out if I'm going to go to a different format than YouTube and Twitter. But I'm too busy at the moment to even think. So, on that note, I think we can just have a quick close, a moment of prayer. I always bring up this prayer board and tell people they should know how to pray, and that God does hear your prayer when you know what you're doing, when you know how to pray. If you don't know how to pray, your prayer doesn't get past the ceiling. That's another expression I like to use. Not that I like it to be that way. It's just a fact. So if you want to know more about this board, join us on Monday night and Wednesday, where I open it up just a little bit at the end. And I hope you have a good weekend. And we will continue on Monday night in our text. Where is it? Witnessing. And it's really apropos right now. It cracks me up how all this stuff always makes sense. What is witnessing? You want to know more about it? See you Monday night, same time, same station. And Leonard, keep feeling better. I hope that you heal quickly. And so my prayer is that you keep being careful and do the right therapy, and eventually some kind of physical therapy, whatever you have to do. And let me know how you're doing. All right. And so Len also says, thank you and God bless. And I say, let's have a good couple days, good weekend, and then reconvene on Monday night. So take care until then. And thanks for being here. And please pray for me that things will work out well. I'm going to be helping out Mom tomorrow. Got a bunch of stuff to do with her. And so you also have a good night, and really appreciate you, and stay well and be careful and stock up on stuff. It's going to get ugly, but we're going to have a good time anyway. All right. Have a good night.